Hi, welcome back to another episode of Tape Time with Tom. My name is Chris, and today we're going to be talking about Napoleon, a Ridley Scott's 2023 epic starring Joaquin Phoenix and Vanessa Kirby. I got to see this in 70mm last week at the AFI Silver in Silver Spring, Maryland. I got to take my dad, and we had an outstanding time watching the movie. So no matter what, I think we're going to have a great time talking about this, and we're going to try to keep this a little bit short because I got two more of these videos that we'll be talking about momentarily after I go see them, because foreshadowing for the future, we'll be seeing Tenet in 70mm, and then we're going to be going to see Dune Part 2 in 70mm. So this is going to be a fun month of me watching movies in theaters as well as talking about them on YouTube. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Let's go ahead and start talking about the movie. For the purposes of this video, this is really going to be just a surface level first impression kind of, I don't even want to call it a review, it's just really just more of a discussion, I think. I'm looking forward to just talking about it and giving a recommendation at the very end. So, Ridley Scott's Napoleon, again, stars Joaquin Phoenix and Vanessa Kirby, and it primarily is the relationship between Napoleon and Vanessa Kirby's Josephine, as well as the backdrop of the French Revolution. And also throughout the whole movie are some really kick-ass battle sequences. Initially, I know that this movie was really big. This was everywhere in November in 2023. I wanted to go see it, and I wanted to see it in 70mm, but I know that there was only just a small handful of places that was actually going to be projecting it. For example, I think it was the Vista in Hollywood, Tarantino's second theater, as well as I think the Coolidge in Massachusetts. I know those two venues had 70mm prints. I wanted to see this movie in theaters. I thought it'd be a lot of fun, but then holidays got ahead of us, and we just never found time to actually watch it. So I thought to myself, oh well, I'll just watch it at home. Fast forward to just a couple of weeks ago when I happened to be looking at the calendar for the AFI, and lo and behold, I saw that there were 2 days where they're showing this movie, and I thought, you know what, let's go ahead and jump on this. I think this is probably going to be the only time I'll ever be able to watch this on a print, let alone a 70mm print in theaters. So I knew I was going to watch the movie at some point, but after it left the initial theatrical run, I just kind of expected to watch it at home. And I still plan to watch it at home, especially the rumored 4-hour episodic serialized director's cut. It's going to be streaming on Apple TV or whatever it is, Apple Plus or whatever it is called. So I'll be watching it there once that comes out. But for right now, I had a fantastic time watching this particular print, and I know I'm going to be talking about this later. But if you get a chance to watch this in theaters on the 70mm print, when it happens to come to your town, I highly recommend it. It was a lot of fun. But I think watching this on the 70mm print was the right choice. And I think if anyone gets a chance to actually see this, like I said before, and I'll probably say this again, definitely go see it, because watching some of these battle sequences, especially in the very beginning and whenever there are these like fade to whites throughout the movie, you really feel like you're like an old school historical Hollywood epic. And it's just a lot of fun seeing these huge widespread battles that I know it has a lot of CGI, but it blends really well under the veneer of this projected film print and everything. But man, it's a lot of fun watching this on 70. It looked outstanding in my opinion. And yeah, I was talking with my dad afterwards. I'm very curious to see what the movie's going to look like when it's on Apple. I'm curious because of how much like color grading. Because like watching it on the big screen projected, it just looked classical. Color-wise, I know some of the cinematography specifically wasn't very classical, but like how it just looked great. And I'm very curious to see what it's going to look like on like our own television. So, and I think I'm willing to bet I would have liked it more watching it in theaters versus watching it for the first time at home. I'm pretty sure if I watched it at home, I don't think I would have gone out of my way to watch it in theaters, if that makes sense. One of the things I like most about Napoleon is how the narrative backbone for the movie really utilizes these series of letters in between Napoleon and Vanessa Kirby's Josephine. So throughout the whole runtime, from the very beginning to practically the very end, we have these letters where they're writing to each other, and I feel like it was a useful and I think a proper way to depict these two characters in the midst of the French Revolution. I thought that was a really interesting way just to ground the story. I find that Joaquin Phoenix gave a really nuanced performance. I think a lot of people's issue is that it just didn't meet expectations. It's a role that Joaquin Phoenix it makes sense for him to do, especially in light of what's his face, Cassius, I think, in Gladiator. So it makes sense for him to work with Ridley Scott again in this kind of venue. But I think his acting in Napoleon is really subtle in a kind of a gregarious kind of way. Like, he's able to go and be this almost like this buffoon when he's pining for Josephine, but he's also, you could see how when he's in these battle sequences, you could see everything running in his head, thinking like, oh, we gotta do this, we gotta do this, we gotta do this, whilst also just kind of like, holy shit, we're in the battle, don't die, don't die, don't die, don't die. And I think I might be in the minority here, but I'm pretty sure Joaquin Phoenix did a fantastic job playing Napoleon. Something interesting for the movie is how it's surprisingly funny, and I think that also played with people's expectations. I think people are going to go into this being like, oh, it's a Ridley Scott high-action biopic for Napoleon, and I don't think people were expecting it to be that funny, but I think it is it's one of Ridley Scott's funniest movies, and I think it works. But also, like, you know, it's a funny movie, and I think it needs to be funny. I just don't think it would be very entertaining if it wasn't kind of making fun of him. You know, I think there lies this really subtle, in a gregarious kind of way, performance from Joaquin Phoenix and how we're making fun of him, but we're also kind of a little bit sympathizing with him too. So I think it's both very funny, but also I think his acting is really good. So it's definitely interesting, and I'm looking forward to rewatching it again to see if I still think this is true. You know, I've seen a handful of movies with Vanessa Kirby. I think she gave a really great job playing Josephine, unfortunately, for how little screen time there actually was. And this kind of This kind of acts as the transition period between what I really liked about the movie and what I kind of like had a little bit of issues with. I think we really needed to have more time with her, because I feel like the movie is mainly structured in between these three factions, where it's the battle sequences, the political machinations of the French Revolution, and the relationship between Napoleon and Josephine. And I feel like the relationship between Napoleon and Josephine was kind of sidelined. There's talks for the Apple serialized 4-hour director's cut or whatever it is that's coming to Apple eventually at some point this year. It's going to be apparently really focusing on Vanessa Kirby, and I feel like it's tough because you're kind of put in between a rock and a hard place, because the whole narrative backbone for the movie is between Josephine and Napoleon, but the other parts of the movie, the battles and the politics of just like general French Revolution history, are more interesting to watch, even though their relationship is what's grounding. So it's unfortunate, and I'm interested in seeing what this miniseries version of the movie is. If anything, mainly just for Vanessa Kirby's performance, because I think she really did a fantastic job. It's just unfortunate that we didn't get to see a lot of it in the movie. If you gave me a quarter for every single time that I saw a Joaquin Phoenix movie that was shot digitally projected on 70mm film, I would have 2 quarters. It's not a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. So out of all the movies that I've seen on 70mm, only 2 of them, Joker and now Napoleon, were shot digitally and then printed on to film. I think one of the issues that I have, it's not a big issue, and it's something that I know a lot of people aren't going to see. I just happened to see it because I was looking for it, is that I feel like, in my opinion, there were times where it was obvious that it was shot digitally compared to some of the other movies that I've seen that were shot on film and then blown up to 70, or just like they were just normal on 70. So if you want a specific point in the movie, I don't have an exact runtime, but I believe it's the point in between when Napoleon is going towards Russia, and then they were ambushed in the forest or something. And I know there's one particular shot panning across a bunch of trees, and it just looks like someone just held a DSLR in a forest or something. So, and unfortunately, like, there's a handful of small instances that are obvious, but otherwise the whole 70mm print looked great, at least in my opinion. So yeah, I don't know, it would have been nice to I'm curious to see if how the movie would have been if it was shot on film, but I also understand why they kind of had to shoot digitally, because there's, man, like, there's so many stories that I've seen online about how efficient Ridley Scott is, like, shooting these battle sequences. Like, man, what they got shows and also looks great. So it's crazy. Ridley Scott is one of those directors that's very hit and miss as of late. Like, I loved The Last Duel, but then just a couple months later, I really did not like House of Gucci. And I feel like the main issue with House of Gucci is that I didn't have a backbone, whereas The Last Duel did. And I think Napoleon works. I think Napoleon is one of his best movies in a long time, because of, unfortunately, this backbone between Napoleon and Josephine. Even though that's like the weakest link in the movie, it's still enough of a backbone to give, I think, the movie some structure. And I think Napoleon is one of his best movies in a long time. I can't say all the way since Gladiator, but definitely in the last 10, 15 years or so. In conclusion, I find, one second, the best way to describe Napoleon is that this is a really great dad movie. Because it's Ridley Scott, and because of his tendency for historical epics like Gladiator and The Last Duel, I think dads like this movie. I think they will like it a lot, and it's might be in part because I saw it with my dad. But I know that this is the kind of movie, had this been made 15 to 20 years ago, and it played on TNT relentlessly, this is the kind of movie that my dad would go, and he'd come in from the garage, and he'd see, like, oh, Austerlitz is coming up. And he's just going to, like, stand and with his hands behind his back, and he's just going to watch the movie, and it's like, yeah, it's pretty great. One last thing before we go. I think this is something that needs to be brought up no matter what. I know that I would have preferred a Stanley Kubrick Napoleon movie. And this is something that, if you guys don't know, back in the 70s, I think it was the 70s, after A Clockwork Orange, Stanley Kubrick decided he set his mind to doing a Napoleon biopic, and it was going to be another one of those super classical epics. Long story short, the movie Waterloo came out, and even though I haven't seen it, that movie kind of ended up destroying his progress, dead in the Holtz, and he ultimately scrapped the whole project and eventually used a lot of his research to make Barry Lyndon. And a lot of this information can be found, as well as the script, which I highly recommend reading, in this book. This book is fantastic. Definitely find it if you can. But yeah, it's a little bittersweet knowing that we finally have a Napoleon movie, but it's not a Stanley Kubrick Napoleon movie. And we're never going to get a Stanley Kubrick Napoleon movie because there hasn't been another Stanley Kubrick. At least I don't think so, not yet. But I find that I am happy with the Napoleon movie that we got. You know, I think Ridley Scott took a swing at it. He might have got a strike, might have got a ball or a foul in there, but ultimately he got around and made it back to home base. I think it is ultimately a recommendable movie, especially if you like historical epics. It's fun, you know. It might not be intentionally fun. Actually, no, I take that back. I think it is meant to be fun, and it's meant to be entertaining. And it is it's just a fun movie. Like, I can't say it's a perfect movie, but it's definitely not the worst thing I've ever seen. Far from that. And I will watch this again at some point in the future, and I'm sure I'm going to have just as much fun as that time. So all this to say is, if you get a chance to find Napoleon playing in your theater in 70mm, go watch it. You're going to have a great time. I think so. And if not, watch it at home. If you don't want to watch it at home, oh well, I don't know. Read the Stanley Kubrick book and just imagine what it could be. Yeah. Well, that's all for today. That's Tape Time with Tom. My name is Chris. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys next week with a Tenet 70mm recap, and then a week after that for a Dune Part 2 70mm recap. And yeah, always rewind, but more importantly, be kind. See you guys later.